Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Shadow Man Stories. I can picture some of you already in bed, maybe some of you just getting home from work. Wherever you are, whatever time it is, I'm glad you're here. If this helps you relax or sleep, please like and subscribe. It means a lot. Now, let's get you comfortable, and I'll tell you tonight's story. My name is Marcus Winterbear, but everyone calls me Mark. I'm a park ranger at Denali National Park in Alaska, and I've been doing this job for 15 years. I know these mountains like the back of my hand. I've rescued people in weather so cold your spit freezes before it hits the ground. I've tracked lost hikers through blizzards that would bury a house. My grandmother used to tell me stories about spirits in these mountains, but I never believed them until February 14th, 1971. I should tell you about myself first, so you'll believe what I'm about to tell you. I'm 39 years old, and my people are Inupiat. That means I've been living with cold and snow my whole life. Before I became a ranger, I taught soldiers how to survive in the Arctic. I know what cold can do to a person, and I know what bears can do too. My wife died 3 years ago in a plane crash. Since then, I live alone in a cabin 80 miles from park headquarters. It's just me, my sled dogs, and the mountains. I like it that way. The cold doesn't bother me, and the quiet helps me think. But that February morning, something felt wrong. I was sitting in my cabin drinking coffee when the radio crackled to life. "Mark, we got a problem." It was Jim, my boss back at headquarters. "That research team up at Wonder Lake, they're 6 days overdue." Wonder Lake sits in the loneliest part of Denali. It's 85 miles from the nearest town. In February, it's one of the coldest places on Earth. The only way to get there is by bush plane or a week-long trip with dogs. "What kind of research?" I asked. "Bear study, 4 scientists from the university. They were supposed to radio in every day." I knew this was bad. Nobody misses radio calls in the wilderness. Not if they're alive. "Their emergency beacon went off yesterday," Jim continued. "Then it went dead. Last thing we heard was something about massive tracks." I felt something cold crawl up my spine, and it wasn't the weather. "I'm sending Tommy Icewalker with you," Jim said. "He knows that area better than anyone." Tommy was 23, grandson of the village elder. Good kid, but he always seemed nervous about the deep wilderness. His grandfather told the old stories. The ones about things that lived in the ice and snow. "When do we leave?" I asked. "Now, weather window closes tomorrow night." I packed my gear, survival equipment, my rifle, emergency flares, and food for a week. My 8 sled dogs sensed something was wrong. They whined and paced in their pen, which wasn't like them at all. Dogs have better instincts than people. Tommy showed up an hour later on his snowmobile, pulling a supply sled. He looked pale, even for winter. "My grandfather doesn't want us to go," he said, not meeting my eyes. "Why not?" He pulled something from his pocket, a small carved bone amulet. "He gave me this, said the spirits are angry this winter." I didn't believe in spirits, but I respected the old ways. If Tommy's grandfather was worried, maybe I should pay attention. "What's got him spooked?" I asked. Tommy pointed up at the sky. The aurora borealis was dancing green and blue across the afternoon sky, which was strange. Aurora usually comes at night. He says the lights are too bright this winter, too active. It means something big is waking up. As we prepared to leave, I noticed the ravens. Normally, they're everywhere around my cabin, looking for scraps. But today, there weren't any. Not one. In 39 years in Alaska, I'd never seen the ravens leave. We loaded the sleds and started the long journey to Wonder Lake. The snowmobiles roared to life, but my dogs still whimpered. The temperature was dropping fast, already 30 below zero and getting colder. As we rode into the wilderness, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching us. The aurora danced overhead like a green fire, and the mountains seemed too quiet. Even the wind had stopped. Tommy rode ahead of me, his snowmobile leaving a trail in the perfect snow. Behind us, my dog team followed, but they kept looking over their shoulders like something was following us. 3 hours into the trip, Tommy stopped and pointed ahead. There, cutting across our path, were tracks in the snow. But these weren't ordinary tracks. They were huge. Bigger than any bear I'd ever seen, and something about them looked wrong. "Bear tracks," I said, trying to convince myself. Tommy shook his head. "Look closer." I got down and examined the prints. They were 18 inches long and looked like bear paws, but the shape was all wrong. They had too many toes, and the claws were too long. Worst of all, some of the prints looked almost like hands. How big would a bear have to be to make these? Tommy asked. I measured the stride with my arms. 12 feet. A bear that size would weigh over a ton. Must be an old print, I said. Wind and melting changed the shape, but I knew that wasn't true. The print was fresh, maybe an hour old. We followed the trail toward Wonder Lake, and with every mile, the feeling of being watched got stronger. The aurora above us pulsed like a heartbeat, and the cold bit deeper than it should have. Something was very wrong in these mountains. Wonder Lake was dead quiet when we arrived. No wind, no bird sounds, nothing. Even our snowmobile engines seemed muffled by the thick air. The research team's camp sat on the frozen shore like a picture, everything covered in perfect white snow. But when we got closer, I could see it wasn't perfect at all. The tents were arranged in a circle, like the scientists had tried to defend themselves from something. Equipment was scattered everywhere. Broken pieces of metal and plastic sticking up through the snow like bones. Look at this, Tommy called out. He was standing by what used to be their main shelter. Long claw marks ran down the side, cutting through the heavy fabric like it was paper. The marks were deep. Whatever made them was incredibly strong. I knelt down and stuck my finger into one of the gashes. It went through the tent wall, through the insulation, and into the wooden support beam behind it. 6 inches deep. No bear does this, I said. We searched the camp carefully. Their food was still there, frozen solid but untouched. Their radio was smashed into pieces. Most strange of all, there was no blood anywhere. With all this damage, there should have been blood. Mark, Tommy's voice was shaky. Over here. He was standing about 50 yards from the camp, looking down at something in the snow. When I reached him, I saw what had scared him. It was Dr. Sarah Kodiak, one of the research team. I recognized her from the photo Jim had shown me. She was sitting upright in the snow, perfectly preserved by the cold. Her eyes were wide open, staring at something only she could see. Her face was locked in absolute terror. But here's the thing that made my skin crawl. She wasn't just frozen. She was frozen from the inside out. I could see ice crystals in her eyes, and when I touched her hand, it was harder than a rock. Whatever killed her had dropped her body temperature so fast that her blood turned to ice in her veins. This isn't natural cold, Tommy whispered. This is something else. I was starting to agree with him. I'd seen people freeze to death before. This wasn't how it worked. We found the second body 20 minutes later. Peter Frostborn, the research assistant, was wedged high up in a pine tree, 40 feet off the ground. His body was frozen solid too, but his clothes weren't torn. Whatever put him there had been gentle about it, almost careful. How did he get up there? Tommy asked. I looked at the tree trunk. No scratches, no broken branches. It was like someone had just placed him there. Something threw him, I said, but I didn't believe it myself. You'd have to be incredibly strong to throw a man that high and incredibly precise to do it without damaging him. That's when our equipment started acting strange. First, Tommy's snowmobile wouldn't start. Then mine died too. The engines just quit, even though they were running perfectly an hour before. Our radio started picking up weird sounds, not static, but something that almost sounded like breathing. We need to find the other 2 researchers, I said, but my voice sounded smaller than I wanted. The tracks we'd been following led away from the camp toward a line of ice caves in the nearby cliffs. The prints were deeper now, like whatever was making them had gotten heavier or angrier. We followed them on foot, carrying our emergency gear. My dogs whined and pulled against their harnesses, trying to go back to the camp. I'd never seen them act like that. The temperature was dropping fast. My breath came out in white clouds that turned to ice crystals and fell to the ground like broken glass. Tommy was chanting something under his breath in Inupiat, prayers, maybe, or protective words his grandfather had taught him. My family has stories about this place, he said as we walked. Old stories. About something that lives in the ice caves. Something that comes out when the aurora lights are strong. What kind of something? He stopped walking and looked at me. Tornarsuk, the great bear spirit. It walks like a man and feeds on life itself. Before I could answer, we heard a sound that made my blood freeze. It was a roar, but not from any animal I knew. It was deeper than a bear, louder than thunder, and it seemed to come from everywhere at once. The sound bounced off the mountains and rolled across the frozen lake like an avalanche. And it was getting closer. Tommy grabbed my arm. It knows we're here. Bears don't know anything, I said, but my hand was already reaching for my rifle. This isn't a bear. The aurora above us suddenly flared bright green, so bright it hurt to look at. The light pulsed in rhythm with my heartbeat, and I could swear I saw something moving in it, a huge shadow passing behind the green fire in the sky. That's when we found the third researcher. Dr. Chen was alive, but barely. We discovered him huddled in a supply cache about half a mile from the main camp. He was awake but not responding, his eyes staring at nothing. His skin was blue from cold, even though he was bundled in Arctic gear. When I touched his shoulder, he suddenly grabbed my wrist with strength I didn't know he had. "It speaks in the cold," he whispered, his voice like breaking ice. "It knows our thoughts. It's been waiting for us. Dr. Chen, where's Dr. Martinez? Where's the fourth member of your team?" But Chen just kept staring and repeating the same words over and over. "It speaks in the cold. It knows our thoughts." Tommy found Dr. Martinez's journal in the cache. The last entry was dated 3 days ago. Asterisk. Day 18. "The creature has been watching us for weeks. We hear it moving around the camp at night, but when we look, there's nothing there. The temperature drops whenever it gets close. Thompson's equipment shows readings that don't make sense, negative heat signatures, electromagnetic distortions. Whatever this thing is, it's not natural. It's not even from this world." Asterisk. The journal had other entries too, describing weeks of stalking by something they couldn't see clearly. Equipment failures. Nightmares that all 4 researchers shared. The same nightmare. Of a giant bear that consumed the aurora itself. As I read, the temperature inside the cache started dropping. Our breath began forming clouds, even though we were inside an insulated shelter with a propane heater running full blast. "Mark," Tommy said quietly, "look outside." Through the small window, I could see a shadow moving across the snow. It was huge, at least 12 feet tall when it stood upright. It moved without sound, gliding across the ground like it weighed nothing at all. 2 blue lights gleamed where its eyes should be, and they were staring right at us. Dr. Chen stopped whispering and looked directly at me. "It's here," he said, and smiled with frozen lips. "It's finally here." The shadow outside disappeared the moment I blinked, like it was never there at all. But the temperature kept dropping. Inside our heated shelter, ice began forming on the walls. Dr. Chen's breathing got slower and slower. Even though we wrapped him in every blanket we could find, his skin turned from blue to white, and his pulse got so weak I could barely find it. "We need to get him to a hospital," I said. Tommy shook his head. "Look at him, Mark. Really look." Chen's body temperature was dropping fast, too fast for normal hypothermia. His skin felt like ice when I touched it, and frost was forming around his nose and mouth with each breath. "How is this possible?" I asked. "It's feeding on him," Tommy said, "from a distance. That's what the stories say. The Tornarsuk can steal your body heat without even touching you." I wanted to argue, to find a logical explanation, but Chen was dying right in front of us. His body was freezing from the inside out, just like Dr. Kodiak. "There has to be something we can do." Tommy was reading Martinez's journal, his face getting paler with each page. "Listen to this," he said, and started reading. Asterisk. Day 15. "Whatever is stalking us, it's intelligent. It destroyed our radio antenna, but left the radio intact, like it wants us to know we can't call for help. It's toying with us. Playing games." Asterisk. Asterisk. Day 16. "Sarah thinks she saw it clearly tonight. She says it looks like a bear, but wrong. Too big, wrong proportions. She swears it was standing upright like a man, watching our camp from the tree line." Asterisk. Asterisk. Day 17. "Found massive claw marks carved into the permafrost near our camp, 6 feet deep into solid ice. No known animal has that kind of strength. Chen is convinced we're dealing with something supernatural. I'm starting to agree." Asterisk. Dr. Chen took one last shallow breath and went still. His body was so cold that frost immediately formed over his skin. In the space of minutes, he had turned into a statue of ice. But it was what happened next that really scared me. Outside the shelter, we heard voices calling for help. Dr. Martinez's voice, clear as day, shouting, "Help us. We're trapped in the caves. Please help." Then Dr. Kodiak's voice, Mark, we're alive. Come find us." Tommy grabbed my arm before I could move toward the door. "Don't listen," he whispered. "Those people are dead. You saw their bodies." But the voices sounded so real, so desperate. Every instinct I had screamed at me to go help them. "It's using their voices," Tommy said. "My grandfather told me about this. The Tornarsuk keeps the souls of everyone it kills. It can use them as bait." The voices got louder, more urgent. Now they were right outside our shelter, pleading for us to come out. But when I looked through the window, I saw nothing but empty snow. That's when our propane heater died. The flame just went out, even though the tank was full. The temperature inside the shelter immediately started dropping. Within minutes, it was colder inside than outside. "It's controlling the cold itself," Tommy said, his breath coming out in white puffs, "making it colder than nature allows." I tried to restart the heater, but it wouldn't light. The propane lines had frozen solid, which shouldn't have been possible with the antifreeze additives we used. Then the voices outside changed. Now I heard my wife calling for me. Sarah's voice, clear and sweet like the day she died. "Mark, I'm waiting for you. Come outside." "I'm so cold, Mark. Help me get warm." Tears froze on my cheeks before I could wipe them away. I knew Sarah was dead. I'd buried her 3 years ago. But hearing her voice made my heart break all over again. "It knows our weaknesses," Tommy said. "It can see inside our minds, find what hurts us most." But Tommy was hearing voices too. He was crying, responding to someone calling him in Inupiat, his mother, maybe, or his grandmother. "We can't stay here," I said. "This place is compromised." We gathered our gear and prepared to leave, but when I tried to open the door, it wouldn't budge. Ice had formed around the edges, sealing us inside like we were in a tomb. I put my shoulder to the door and pushed with all my strength. The ice cracked, and cold air rushed in like a living thing. The temperature outside was now so low that it hurt to breathe. We stumbled out into the night, carrying our survival gear and emergency supplies. The aurora overhead was brighter than I'd ever seen it, pulsing and swirling like it was alive. And in the green light, I could see tracks everywhere. The same massive, wrong-shaped prints we'd found before. But now there were hundreds of them, circling our shelter, leading off in every direction. Like whatever was making them had been pacing around our shelter for hours, deciding what to do with us. "This way," Tommy said, pointing toward a ridge that would give us higher ground. "We need to get away from the caves." But as we walked, the tracks followed us. Not old tracks, fresh ones, appearing in the snow as we moved. Something was following us, staying just out of sight. Every few minutes, we'd hear movement in the darkness around us, the crunch of snow, the snap of a branch. But when we turned to look, there was nothing there. "It's hurting us," I realized. "Keeping us moving in the direction it wants." Tommy nodded grimly. "Toward the ice caves. That's where it lives." The cold was getting worse. My fingers were numb even inside my heavy gloves, and my feet were starting to lose feeling. This wasn't natural Arctic cold. This was something else. Something supernatural. Then, we saw it clearly for the first time. A shadow moved across the ridge above us, silhouetted against the aurora. It was massive, at least 12 feet tall when it stood upright. It had the general shape of a bear, but wrong in every detail. The proportions were too human, the limbs too long, the head too large, and its eyes glowed electric blue, like frozen lightning. It stood there for a moment, letting us see it, letting our fear grow. Then it opened its mouth and roared again, that sound that was deeper than thunder and seemed to come from the earth itself. The roar started an avalanche on the far slope, tons of snow cascading down the mountainside. But the creature didn't seem bothered by the noise. It was in complete control of its environment. "Tornarsuk," Tommy whispered. The creature turned its massive head toward us, and I swear it smiled with too many teeth. Then it was gone, vanishing into the storm that seemed to follow it wherever it went. But we could still feel it watching us, stalking us, playing with us like a cat plays with mice. And I was beginning to understand that we weren't going to make it out of these mountains alive. Tommy and I found an emergency cache 3 miles from where we'd seen the creature. It was a small shelter built into the rocks, designed to hold supplies for stranded climbers. We broke inside and barricaded the door with everything we could find. But I knew it wouldn't matter. If this thing could control cold itself, a few pieces of furniture wouldn't stop it. Inside the cache, we found emergency food, medical supplies, and most importantly, a working radio. I tried to contact park headquarters, but all I got was static, filled with sounds that made my skin crawl, growling, breathing, and underneath it all, voices whispering in languages I didn't recognize. My grandfather knew this would happen, Tommy said while I worked on the radio. He was sitting in the corner, holding the bone amulet his grandfather had given him. He told me stories about the last time the Tornarsuk woke up. That was 1923. What happened in 1923? A hunting party went into these mountains during a winter when the aurora was strong. 8 men went in, only 1 came back, and he was crazy from what he'd seen. He said the Tornarsuk had taken the others, consumed their souls to make itself stronger. I finally got a weak signal on the radio. Jim's voice crackled through the static. Mark? Mark, is that you? Jim, we need immediate evacuation. The research team is dead, and there's something up here. The radio went dead. When I tried again, all I heard was my wife's voice coming through the static. Mark, why didn't you save me? Why did you let me die? I threw the radio against the wall, smashing it into pieces. It's inside our heads now, Tommy said quietly. It knows everything about us. Our fears, our guilt, our weaknesses. The temperature in the cache was dropping again, even though we'd sealed every crack and gap we could find. Ice was forming on the inside of the walls, creating patterns that looked almost like writing. Tommy stood up suddenly, staring at the frost patterns. Mark, look at this. The ice formations were spelling out words in English. Hungry, cold, alone. As we watched, new words appeared. Join us. Feed us. Become us. It's not just hunting us, I said. It's trying to communicate. My grandfather said the Tornarsuk feeds on life force, Tommy said. But what it really wants is to not be alone. It's been trapped in these mountains for thousands of years, and it's trying to collect companions. The words in the ice changed again. Tommy. Mark. Friends. Tommy pulled out his knife and started carving symbols into the wooden wall of the cache. Ancient Inupiat protective marks, the same ones his ancestors had used. This might buy us some time, he said, but it won't stop it. To really stop the Tornarsuk, someone has to complete the banishment ritual. What ritual? Tommy's hands were shaking as he carved. The one my great-grandfather used in 1923. But it requires a sacrifice. Someone has to give their life willingly to create a protective barrier around the survivors. Before I could respond, the walls of the cache started shaking. Something was outside, something massive, testing the strength of our shelter. Then the roof began to bend inward, metal groaning under incredible weight. It's on top of us, I whispered. Suddenly, the shaking stopped. In the silence, we heard footsteps circling the cache. But these weren't normal footsteps. They were too heavy, too slow, too deliberate. Each step shook the ground like a small earthquake. Then it spoke. The voice came from everywhere at once, through the walls, through the floor, through the air itself. It sounded like grinding glaciers, like ice breaking apart in the spring. I have been alone for so long, it said in perfect English, so cold, so hungry. You will stay with me, you will keep me warm. We're not staying anywhere with you, I called out, trying to sound braver than I felt. The creature laughed, a sound like an avalanche. You have no choice. This mountain is my domain. The cold is my weapon. You cannot leave. To prove its point, the temperature dropped another 20 degrees in seconds. The water in our supplies froze solid, and frost began forming on our skin. Your friends tried to leave, the voice continued. The woman in white coats, the man with cameras, they ran and ran, but the cold caught them. The cold always catches them. Tommy was chanting now in Inupiat, his voice getting stronger with each word. The bone amulet in his hand was starting to glow with a soft blue light. The creature noticed. Ah, the old words, the old protections. Your great-grandfather knew those words too. They did not save him. My great-grandfather banished you, Tommy said, still chanting. He trapped me, the creature corrected. But traps can be broken. I grow stronger with each soul I take. Soon I will be strong enough to leave these mountains, to hunt in the warm lands below. The walls of the cache began to crack. Ice was forming in the gaps, expanding and splitting the metal like it was made of paper. "You're going to destroy this whole shelter," I said. "I am going to free you from it," the creature replied. "Free you from your flesh, from your warmth, from your pain. You will be ice and snow and hunger, like me. You will be eternal." Tommy stood up, still holding his glowing amulet. "Mark, I know what I have to do. Don't even think about it. It's the only way. The ritual requires a willing sacrifice to create a protective barrier. If I do this, you might be able to get away. There has to be another way." Tommy smiled sadly. "My whole family has been waiting for this moment. We've been the guardians for generations, keeping this thing contained. It's my turn now." The cache walls finally gave way. Metal and wood exploded inward as something enormous forced its way inside. And there it was, the Tornarsuk in all its terrible glory. It was 12 feet tall and covered in thick white fur that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Its body was like a massive bear's, but the proportions were all wrong, the limbs too long, the torso too wide, the head too intelligent. Its eyes were electric blue and completely alien, showing an intelligence that was ancient and hungry and utterly without mercy. When it smiled, I saw rows of teeth like icicles. "Hello, little warm ones," it said. Tommy raised his amulet and shouted something in Inupiat. The bone carving flared with brilliant blue light, and the creature actually took a step backward. "The old magic," it hissed. "But you are just one boy. Your great-grandfather had 8 warriors with him." "I don't need 8 warriors," Tommy said. "I just need to be willing." He stepped toward the creature, still chanting, still holding the amulet high. The Tornarsuk snarled and reached for him with claws like frozen daggers. But Tommy was ready. He completed the chant and grabbed the creature's massive paw with his bare hands. The effect was immediate. Both Tommy and the Tornarsuk froze in place, locked together like statues. Blue light spread from the amulet up Tommy's arm, across his body, and into the creature. "Mark," Tommy said through gritted teeth. "Run, now." The Tornarsuk roared in frustration and pain. The blue light was binding it, creating a supernatural barrier it couldn't break. But it was killing Tommy. I could see the life draining from his face as the ritual consumed him. "I won't leave you," I said. "You have to. Someone needs to tell the story. Someone needs to warn people." The creature tried to pull away from Tommy, but the blue light held them together. "This will not hold me forever, boy. When you die, I will be free." "Maybe," Tommy gasped. "But it'll hold you long enough." He looked at me one last time. "Tell my grandfather I did my duty. Tell him the old ways still work." Then the blue light flared so bright I had to close my eyes. When I opened them again, Tommy was gone. In his place was a statue of ice, still holding the bone amulet, still touching the Tornarsuk's paw. The creature was trapped, locked in ice, but its blue eyes were still moving, still watching me with ancient hunger. "This is not over," it said, its voice now distant and echoing. "The ice will melt, the barriers will weaken. And I will remember you, Mark Winterbear. I will dream of your warmth." A blue bubble of protective energy surrounded me, Tommy's final gift. Inside it, I was safe from the supernatural cold. I ran. I made it back to civilization 3 days later, half frozen and completely exhausted. A rescue helicopter found me wandering on the main park road, babbling about monsters and ice caves. They said I was delirious from hypothermia and exposure. The official report listed the deaths of the research team as extreme weather exposure. Tommy's death was recorded as lost in avalanche. They found his body exactly where I told them, frozen solid in the emergency cache. But they didn't find any statue or creature, just Tommy, frozen, holding his grandfather's amulet. They made me sign papers. Lots of papers. Non-disclosure agreements, medical waivers, psychiatric evaluation forms. Men in dark suits asked me questions about what I'd seen, then told me I hadn't seen anything at all. The area around Wonder Lake was permanently closed to researchers. Official reason: geological instability and extreme weather patterns. But I know the truth. The creature is still there, trapped in ice but not destroyed. Every winter during peak aurora activity, hikers go missing in that area. The Park Service quietly discourages people from going there, rerouting trails and posting warnings about dangerous wildlife. Tommy's grandfather wasn't surprised when I told him what happened. He just nodded sadly and said his grandson had fulfilled the family duty. Then he gave me something, another bone amulet, just like Tommy's, "You're part of the watch now," he said. "The Tornarsuk will sleep for a while, but it will wake again. When it does, someone needs to be ready." That was over 50 years ago. I'm an old man now, but I still live in these mountains. I still watch. During the winters, when the aurora is strongest, I hike up to that closed area and check the ice caves, making sure the barriers are holding, making sure Tommy's sacrifice still means something. Sometimes, late at night, I can hear it calling to me through the wind, promising warmth if I'll just come closer, promising an end to loneliness if I'll just let it out. But I remember Tommy's courage, I remember his sacrifice, and I keep watching. Because some things are too dangerous to forget, some warnings need to be passed down from generation to generation. And some monsters never really die, they just wait. If you're ever hiking in Alaska and you see aurora borealis during the day, turn around and go home. If the ravens disappear and the dogs won't stop whining, leave immediately. And if you ever find tracks in the snow that are too big and shaped wrong, don't follow them. Some things in these mountains are still hungry. Some things are still waiting. And winter never really ends. My name is Jackson Moonwalker, but everyone calls me Jack. I'm a park ranger for Gates of the Arctic National Park in Alaska, and I've been doing this job for 17 years. My people, the Gwich'in, have lived in this land for thousands of years. My grandfather used to tell me stories about things that hunt in the endless summer light, but I never believed him. Until July 15, 1979. That was the day I learned my grandfather's stories weren't just stories, they were warnings. I was flying my bush plane over the northern Brooks Range, about 200 miles above the Arctic Circle. It was the middle of summer, which means the sun never sets up here. We call it the midnight sun. The sky stays bright 24 hours a day, and it can mess with your head if you're not used to it. I was checking on a research station that had gone quiet. 6 scientists were up there studying how the frozen ground was changing. They had good equipment and plenty of supplies. But for 12 days, nobody had heard from them. Their emergency radio was working fine, but when people tried to talk to them, nobody answered back. The last message they sent was weird. Dr. Rebecca Lightbane, the team leader, said their shadows were acting wrong. Command figured she meant their equipment was broken. Shadows can't act wrong, right? As I flew closer to the station, I noticed something that made my skin crawl. There were no animals anywhere. Usually, this area is full of life during summer. Caribou, wolves, birds, even bugs, but I didn't see anything moving down there. It was like every living thing had just left. The air felt wrong too. Even though the sun was shining bright, it was getting cold, really cold. My breath started making little clouds inside the heated cabin. That shouldn't happen in July. Then I saw the research station. It looked normal from above. The buildings were still standing, and I could see their vehicles parked outside. But something about it felt empty. Not just quiet, empty, like nobody had been there for years. I radioed my base. "This is Ranger Moonwalker. I can see the research station. Everything looks okay from up here, but I'm getting a bad feeling about this place." "Copy that, Jack," came the reply. "Take a look around, but be careful. We've got reports of strange weather in your area." Strange weather. If they only knew. I landed my plane on a flat stretch of ground about half a mile from the station. As soon as I stepped out, I knew something was very wrong. The silence was complete. No wind, no birds, no insects buzzing, just dead quiet. And then there was the humming. It was so low I almost didn't notice it at first. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at the same time. It made my teeth ache. I checked my gear. I had my rifle for polar bears, a radio, emergency medical kit, cold weather clothes, and some other supplies. I also had something my grandfather gave me when I started this job. A small leather pouch with traditional protection items inside. I never used it, but I always carried it. Today, I was glad I had it. The walk to the station felt like it took forever, even though it was only half a mile. With every step, the wrongness got stronger. The sun was shining bright, but I felt like I was walking into a dark place. When I got close to the main building, I saw something that made me stop dead in my tracks. There was a thermometer mounted outside the door. It read -10 degrees. In July, in direct sunlight, I tried the radio again. "Base, this is Jack. I'm at the research station. Something is definitely wrong here." The temperature is way below freezing, and I haven't seen any signs of life. Static, then. Jack, we're getting weird readings from your area, some kind of magnetic disturbance. Be very careful. I walked up to the main door. It was unlocked. I pushed it open and called out, "Hello? Anybody here? This is Park Ranger Moonwalker." No answer. But as I stepped inside, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The building was warm inside. All the lights were on. There was food on the table, like someone had just stopped eating lunch. Computers were running. Everything looked normal. Except for one thing. I couldn't see my shadow anywhere. The lights were bright. I was standing right under them, but I cast no shadow at all. I stood in that doorway for a long time, staring at the floor where my shadow should have been. I moved around, waved my arms, even jumped up and down. Nothing. It was like my shadow had just disappeared. Then I remembered what my niece Anna always said about the old stories. She was getting her degree in anthropology and spent a lot of time with our elders, learning the traditional ways. Anna was smart and usually didn't believe in the old superstitions, but she respected them. Uncle Jack, she'd told me once, grandfather's stories about the Ijirok aren't just fairy tales. The Ijirok are shapeshifters that hunt by stealing shadows first. When you lose your shadow, you start losing your connection to the living world. At the time, I'd laughed it off. Now I wasn't laughing. I pulled out my camera and took some pictures of the room. When I looked at them, my heart nearly stopped. In the photos, I could see the research team. All 6 of them, sitting around the table, eating lunch. They looked normal, except their shadows were moving wrong. Some shadows were reaching in different directions than their bodies. Others seemed to be crawling across the floor by themselves. I dropped the camera and ran outside. I needed to think, and I needed fresh air. That's when I saw Anna walking toward me across the empty ground. "Anna?" I called out. "What are you doing here?" She was carrying her backpack and looked like she'd been hiking for hours. When she got close, I could see she was worried. "Uncle Jack, I've been trying to reach you on the radio for 2 days. I was at the village when the elders started having dreams about shadow hunters. They sent me to find you." "Dreams?" "The same dream, all of them. Shadow beings hunting during the midnight sun, stealing people's spirits through their shadows. They said it was happening somewhere in the park." She looked at the research station. "Here?" I told her what I'd found inside. She listened without interrupting, but I could see fear growing in her eyes. "Uncle, we need to leave. Right now." "I can't leave. Those people might still be alive somewhere." Anna shook her head. "If they've lost their shadows, they're not alive in the way we understand it. They're caught between worlds." To prove her wrong, I showed her the photos on my camera. When she saw them, she went very pale. "These were taken just now?" she asked. "Yes, but look at the timestamp in the corner." I looked. The photos were dated 3 days ago. "That's impossible," I said. "I just took these." Anna was already digging through her backpack. She pulled out a small bundle wrapped in caribou hide. "Grandmother's protection bundle," she said. "We're going to need it." We went back inside the station together. This time, I watched Anna carefully. Like me, she cast no shadow under the bright lights. Anna unwrapped her grandmother's bundle and pulled out some small carved bone pieces and a handful of dried herbs. She sprinkled the herbs around the doorway and placed the bone pieces on the windowsills. "What's that supposed to do?" "It won't stop them, but it might help us see them coming." As if in response to her words, the humming sound got louder. The lights in the station flickered once, twice, then went out completely. But we could still see. The sunlight coming through the windows was getting brighter, much brighter than it should be. And in that bright light, we saw them. Shadows. Dozens of them, moving across the walls and floor. But there was nobody there to cast these shadows. They were moving by themselves, like black creatures made of darkness. One shadow reached toward Anna. She grabbed my arm and pulled me away from it. "Don't let them touch you," she whispered. "If they touch you, they can pull your shadow completely away from your body." We backed toward the door, but more shadows were sliding across the floor, blocking our path. They moved like they were alive, like they were hunting us. That's when I heard the voice. It came from everywhere at once, like the humming, but it was definitely a human voice. A woman's voice. "Help us," it said. "Please help us." I recognized it. Dr. Rebecca Lightbane, the research team leader. "Where are you?" I called out. "We're here. We're right here," But we can't get back. Anna grabbed my sleeve. Don't listen to it, Uncle. That's not really her anymore. But the voice kept calling. Jack, please. We're trapped. The shadows. They took our shadows, and now we can't get back to our bodies. Help us. I looked around the room. I could see the research team in the photos, sitting at the table. But when I looked at the table itself, it was empty. Where are your bodies? I asked the voice. We don't know. Somewhere between the light and the dark, somewhere between alive and dead. The shadows on the walls were moving faster now, swirling around us like a storm made of darkness. The temperature was dropping fast. I could see my breath, and Anna was shivering. We need to get out of here, she said. But when we looked toward the door, there was a shadow standing in it. A shadow in the shape of a person, but no person was there to cast it. The shadow raised one arm and pointed at us. Then it spoke with Dr. Lightbane's voice. You can't leave. Not until you join us. Not until the shadow harvest is complete. The shadow in the doorway didn't move like a normal shadow should. It stepped toward us, its feet making soft scraping sounds on the floor, like fingernails dragging across wood. Behind it, more shadows started pouring into the room. Anna whispered something in the old language and threw more herbs from her grandmother's bundle. Where the herbs landed, the shadows pulled back, but only for a few seconds. That won't hold them for long, she said. We need to find another way out. I looked around the station. There were windows, but they were high up and small. The only real exit was the door, and that was blocked by what looked like an army of living shadows. Then I remembered something from my training. Research stations like this always have emergency exits. I found a metal door at the back of the building that led to a small storage room. From there, another door led outside. This way, I said, but as we moved toward the back door, the shadows followed us. They flowed across the walls and floor like black water, always staying between us and any way out. The voice of Dr. Lightbane spoke again, but now it sounded different. Colder. You cannot escape, Jackson Moonwalker. We know you. We know your family. We know about your grandfather. What about my grandfather? He was here before. In 1943, he tried to stop us then, too. Anna looked at me with wide eyes. Uncle, grandfather never told us about that. Your grandfather was young then, the voice continued. Foolish. He thought the old ways could protect him. But we are older than the old ways. We are older than your people. We are older than the ice. More shadows were moving now, and they weren't just on the walls anymore. They were standing up from the floor, taking the shape of people. I could see the research team, all 6 of them, but they were made of shadow, not flesh. The shadow that looked like Dr. Lightbane stepped closer. We are the Ijirak, the shadow hunters. We have waited so long for the midnight sun to return with this strength. The barriers between worlds grow thin when day never ends. Anna pulled out a small knife and cut her palm. Blood dripped onto the floor. Where it landed, the shadows couldn't go. They hissed and pulled back like the blood was burning them. Blood of the people who belong to this land, she said to me. It's the only thing that really stops them. How much blood do we have? She looked at her cut palm. Not enough. The shadow of Dr. Lightbane laughed. The young one knows the old ways. Good. That will make her more useful when she joins us. What do you want? I asked. We want to return to the world of the living. For too long we have been trapped in the shadow realm, existing only when someone casts a shadow during the endless day. But now, with enough life force, enough human shadows, we can become solid again. We can walk in both worlds. And you need us to do that. We need everyone. The research team was not enough. We need the whole village. We need the children. That's when I got angry. Really angry. Nobody threatens Gwitch and children. Not while I'm alive. I pulled out my rifle. Let us go, or I start shooting. The shadow thing that used to be Dr. Lightbane smiled. I could see its teeth, black as the deepest night. Bullets cannot harm us, Ranger. We are not made of flesh anymore. To prove it was wrong, I aimed and fired right at its chest. The bullet went straight through the shadow and smacked into the wall behind it. The shadow didn't even flinch. See, it said. But thank you for the noise. It will help call the others. Outside, I heard something that made my blood freeze. The sound of my airplane engine starting up. Anna and I ran to the window. My plane was moving across the ground by itself. There was nobody in the pilot's seat, but I could see a shadow sitting there, working the controls with shadow hands. "They're cutting off our escape route," Anna said. The plane lifted off and flew away into the endless bright sky. "Now you are truly alone with us," said the shadow of Dr. Lightbane, "just as we wanted." More shadows were rising from the floor now. Not just the research team, but others. Dozens of others. Some looked like people in old-fashioned clothes. Some looked like Gwich'in hunters from long ago. "How long have you been doing this?" I asked. "Since the first humans came to this land. We feed during the midnight sun, when the barriers are weakest. Most years we can only take one or two. But this year is special. This year the sun burns brighter and longer. This year we can take everyone." Anna was backing away from the shadows, but there wasn't anywhere left to go. We were pressed against the far wall of the station. "Uncle," she whispered, "I'm going to try the old ritual, the one grandmother taught me. But it requires a sacrifice." "What kind of sacrifice?" "The old kind, blood and spirit." I didn't like the sound of that. "Anna, no. It's the only way to save the village. The only way to stop them from taking the children." The shadows were moving closer. The temperature in the room was dropping so fast that frost was forming on the windows. My fingers were getting numb, and Anna's lips were turning blue. One of the shadow people reached out toward Anna's face. She slashed at it with her bloody knife, and where her blood touched the shadow, it screamed and pulled back. "They're afraid of our blood," she said, "but only while we're alive. Once they take our shadows completely, our blood won't help anymore." I could feel something happening to me, a coldness that started in my chest and spread outward. When I looked down, I saw my shadow flickering in and out of existence like a dying light bulb. "Anna, I'm losing my shadow." She looked at me, and her face went white. "Mine too." The shadow of Dr. Lightbane laughed again. "Yes, soon you will join us. Soon you will help us harvest the rest of your people." But Anna was already moving. She pulled out a small pouch from her grandmother's bundle and poured something that looked like black sand in a circle around us. "Sacred earth from the old burial ground," she said, "mixed with ash from fires that burned for 1,000 years." The shadows stopped moving toward us, but they didn't retreat. "That will not hold us for long, child," said the shadow, "and when it fails, you will become one of us. Your uncle too." Anna looked at me with tears in her eyes. "Uncle, I need you to trust me. What I'm about to do, it's going to look bad. But it's the only way." "Anna, what are you planning?" She pulled out her knife again and pressed the blade against her throat. "The ritual requires a willing sacrifice. Someone who gives up their life freely to save others. When I die here, in this circle, my spirit will go into the shadow realm. I'll be able to fight them there, on their own ground." "No." I grabbed for the knife, but she pulled away. "There's no other way, Uncle. If I don't do this, they'll take everyone in the village, all the children, all our people." The shadows pressed against the circle of sacred earth. I could see it starting to glow faintly, but the light was getting dimmer. "The barrier is weakening," Anna said. "I have to do this now." She raised the knife. "Wait," I shouted, grabbing Anna's wrist before she could cut her throat. "There has to be another way." The shadow of Dr. Lightbane laughed. "There is no other way, Ranger. The child knows this. She has read the old stories. Only willing sacrifice can break our hold on this place." "What old stories?" I demanded, looking at Anna. Anna's eyes were full of tears, but her voice was steady. "The story of the Shadow War. From the time when your grandfather was young. He didn't tell you because he was ashamed. Ashamed of what? He ran away. When the Ijarak came to the village in 1943, he was supposed to perform the sacrifice ritual, but he couldn't do it. He couldn't give up his life for the others. So, other people died instead. The temperature in the room was so cold now that our breath came out in thick white clouds. The circle of sacred earth around us was flickering like a dying candle. Grandfather never told me any of this, because he spent the rest of his life trying to forget it. But the elders remember. They always remember. The shadow thing wearing Dr. Lightbane's shape pressed closer to the edge of our protective circle. "Your grandfather was weak, but you don't have to be. Let the girl sacrifice herself, and we will make your death quick." That's when I understood what was really happening. These things weren't just hunting random people. They were specifically going after my family. They had been planning this for decades. "You've been waiting for me to come here," I said. "Yes." We needed someone with the blood of the old families, someone whose sacrifice would have real power. Your grandfather denied us. But now we have his grandson and his granddaughter. Anna raised the knife again. Uncle, please, let me do this. No. I knocked the knife out of her hands. I won't let you die for something our grandfather did. But as I said that, I felt my shadow slipping away completely. The coldness in my chest spread to my arms and legs. I was starting to feel disconnected from my own body, like I was floating just above myself. Anna grabbed my hand. Uncle, look at me. Look at me. I looked down. Anna was flickering, becoming see-through like she was made of smoke. We're both losing ourselves, she whispered. In a few more minutes, we'll be like them, shadows without bodies. The sacred earth circle around us was almost gone now, just a few dim spots of light in the growing darkness. That's when I heard another voice. A voice I recognized. Jackson. It was my grandfather. But he had been dead for 5 years. I looked around and saw him standing behind the shadow creatures. He looked just like I remembered, but he was faint, like a reflection in old glass. Grandfather? I have been waiting for this moment, he said. Waiting to make up for my failure. The shadow of Dr. Lightbane turned toward my grandfather's spirit. You cannot be here. You refused the call. You lost the right to enter this realm. I lost the right to enter it as a living person, grandfather said. But I never lost the right to enter it as a spirit. Anna gasped. He's been in the shadow realm all this time. Not alive, not dead, but waiting. Waiting for what? I asked. Grandfather walked through the shadow creatures like they weren't even there. Waiting to teach you what I should have taught you long ago. The sacrifice the ritual requires. It doesn't have to be death. What do you mean? The Ijurak feed on the connection between body and shadow. They steal that connection, leaving people trapped between worlds. But if someone willingly gives up that connection, not through death, but through spiritual choice, they can enter the shadow realm with full power. The shadow creatures were getting agitated. They pressed harder against our weakening circle. He lies, screamed the shadow wearing Dr. Lightbane's form. Only death can break the barrier. No, said grandfather. Only sacrifice, and there are different kinds of sacrifice. He looked at me with those old, sad eyes. Jackson, you can choose to release your shadow willingly. Let it go into their realm. But keep your spirit tied to this world. You will exist in both places at once. You will be able to fight them on their ground while staying alive in this one. What happens to me? You will be changed. Forever. You will see things others cannot see. You will know when the shadow realm touches our world. And you will be able to stop it. Anna squeezed my hand. Uncle, I think he's right. In the old stories, there were people called shadow walkers. They could move between worlds. The circle of sacred earth around us flickered and went out. The shadow creatures surged forward. I didn't have time to think about it anymore. I closed my eyes and let go. I let go of the connection between my body and my shadow. I felt it slip away, like a rope sliding through my fingers. For a moment, I thought I was dying. Then I opened my eyes and saw everything. I could see the research station, but I could also see through it to the shadow realm beneath. I could see the shadow creatures, but now they looked different. They weren't monsters. They were people, just like us, but they had been trapped in the darkness for so long that they had forgotten how to be human. I can see you, I said to them. I can see what you really are. The shadow wearing Dr. Lightbane's shape stopped advancing. For the first time, it looked afraid. You're not evil, I continued. You're just lost. You've been trapped so long that you forgot there's another way back to the living world. I stepped out of the circle and walked toward them. Anna tried to follow, but I held up my hand. Stay there. You're still fully human. This is something I have to do alone. I reached out to the shadow that used to be Dr. Lightbane. When I touched it, I could feel all its pain and confusion and desperate hunger to be alive again. You don't have to steal our shadows, I said. I can show you how to find your way back to your own bodies. And in that moment, with my grandfather's spirit guiding me and Anna's prayers supporting me, I did something that nobody had done for hundreds of years. I opened a door between the worlds. The rescue team found us 3 days later. Anna was sitting by my unconscious body, keeping me warm and feeding me water when I was awake enough to drink. She told them I had gotten sick from the extreme cold and that she'd been taking care of me. The research team was found alive in their sleeping bags. suffering from hypothermia and memory loss. They remembered arriving at the station and setting up their equipment, but nothing after that. The official report blamed equipment failures during an unusual magnetic storm. Dr. Lightbane asked me once, just before they evacuated us, if I knew what had happened to 3 weeks of her life. I told her that sometimes the Arctic takes time away from people, but it usually gives it back eventually. She seemed satisfied with that answer. I never told anyone except Anna what really happened in that station. How could I? Who would believe that shadow creatures from another dimension had been hunting our people for centuries? But I was changed by what happened. Anna was right about that. I can see things now that other people can't see. During the midnight sun periods, when day never ends and shadows get confused, I can sense when the barrier between worlds gets thin. I can tell when something from the shadow realm is trying to cross over. The research station is closed now. The government says it's because of unstable permafrost, but I know the real reason. Every summer, during the peak of the midnight sun, shadows still move wrong in that place. Not dangerous anymore, just different, like a scar on the world that never quite healed. Anna finished her degree and became an anthropologist like she planned, but she also became something else, a keeper of the old stories. She makes sure the traditional protection methods don't get forgotten. She teaches the children about the shadow realm, not to scare them, but to prepare them. Because we know the Ijirak will be back someday. The door I opened that night went both ways. Yes, I helped the trapped shadows find their way back to their bodies, and yes, I stopped them from hunting our people. But I also made it easier for other things to cross between worlds. Sometimes, on nights when the aurora dances bright in the winter sky, I see things moving in the light that shouldn't be there. Shapes that aren't quite human, but aren't quite animal either. They watch our village from the tree line, but they don't come closer. They seem to be waiting for something. Anna says they're waiting for the barriers to weaken again. She says that climate change is affecting more than just the weather up here. It's affecting the spiritual balance of the land. The old protections that our people maintained for thousands of years are getting harder to keep in place. We've started training others, young people who have the right bloodline, the right spiritual strength. We teach them the traditional ways, but we also teach them about the shadow realm. We prepare them for the day when something bigger and hungrier than the Ijirak decides to cross over, because that day is coming. I can feel it in my bones during the dark winter months, and I can see it in the strange movements of light during the endless summer days. My grandfather's spirit visited me one more time, about a year after the incident at the research station. He looked peaceful, finally free of the guilt he'd carried for so long. "You did well, Jackson," he told me. "You found the better way." "What happens now?" I asked him. "Now you watch. You guard. You protect our people the way I couldn't." "For how long?" He smiled, and for a moment he looked the way he had when I was a small child, before age and regret had worn him down. "For as long as the shadow realm touches our world, for as long as the midnight sun shines, for as long as our people need protection." Then he faded away, and I knew I wouldn't see him again. He had found his peace at last. But my work was just beginning. Every summer, when the sun circles the sky without setting and shadows start acting strange, I pack my gear and head out into the wilderness. I check the old sacred sites, the places where the barrier between worlds has always been thin. I watch for signs of new intrusions from the shadow realm, and every summer, I find them, usually small things. A tree that casts 3 shadows instead of 1, a creek that reflects light from the wrong direction, animal tracks that show up in photographs, but disappear when you look directly at them. I deal with these problems quietly, using the methods Anna and I have developed. A mixture of traditional spiritual protection and modern understanding of how the two realms connect. The people in our village sleep safely because they don't know what's out there in the endless daylight, watching and waiting. That's how it should be. That's how it has to be. Because I learned something important that night in the research station. The shadow realm isn't evil, and the things that live there aren't monsters. They're just hungry and desperate and lost. But hunger and desperation can be just as dangerous as evil. Maybe more dangerous, because you might feel sorry for them right up until they devour you. So I watch, and I guard, and I keep the barriers strong. And when the time comes, when something really dangerous tries to cross over from the Shadow Realm, I'll be ready. Anna will be ready too. Because we are the Shadow Walkers now. We stand between the worlds, protecting both sides from each other. It's not the life I expected when I became a park ranger, but it's the life my people need me to live. And on quiet nights, when the aurora dances green and gold across the star-filled sky, I think I can hear my grandfather's voice carried on the wind, telling me I'm doing good work. That's enough for me. That has to be enough. My name is Nathaniel Deepcurrent, but everyone calls me Nate. I'm a ranger with the National Park Service, and for the past 15 years, I've been watching over Glacier Bay in Alaska. It's not like other parks where families come to camp and hike. This place is wild and dangerous, surrounded by ice mountains that drop chunks the size of houses into the freezing water without warning. I live on my boat year-round because that's the only way to keep an eye on this place. The Ranger's Pride is a tough 45-foot vessel that can handle the rough waters and floating ice. She's got everything I need: radio, depth finder, emergency gear, and enough fuel to reach any corner of the bay. I know these waters better than most people know their own backyard. Before I came here, I spent 12 years in the Coast Guard. I was in the Pacific during the war, pulling sailors out of burning ships and navigating through enemy waters. I thought I'd seen everything the ocean could throw at me. But Glacier Bay taught me there are things in the deep water that no training can prepare you for. The local Tlingit people have stories about this place. They call it the home of Kosh Da Ka, a sea monster that lives under the ice. Old fishermen would warn me about certain areas where boats shouldn't go, especially when the glaciers are calving. I always listened politely, but I never believed them. I was wrong. August 3rd, 1955. That's the date everything changed for me. The research vessel, Northern Pioneer, had been missing for 8 days. The marine biology team was supposed to be studying how the glaciers affect sea life. Their last radio message mentioned a massive underwater disturbance near Marjorie Glacier. Then nothing. I knew Dr. Marina Deepwater and her team, good people, careful scientists who understood the dangers of working in glacier waters. When they didn't check in, I knew something was very wrong. The morning I went looking for them, the bay felt different. Normally, you'd see seals sunning on ice floes and hear the calls of gulls and eagles, but that day, the water was eerily quiet. No birds, no seals, no whales. Even the usual creaking and groaning of the ice seemed muffled. Joseph Stormtide met me at the dock in Gustavus. He's a Tlingit fishing guide who knows these waters as well as I do. His grandfather taught him the old ways of reading the sea and sky. Joseph had agreed to help with the search, but I could see the worry in his eyes. "You sure about this, Captain?" he asked as we loaded supplies. My grandfather always said there are times when the sea spirits get angry. The signs are all wrong today. I checked my equipment one more time. Radio, depth sounder, emergency flares, medical kit, rifle, and enough food for 3 days. Everything looked good, but Joseph's words stuck with me. In all my years on the water, I'd learned to trust the instincts of people who'd lived here their whole lives. As we headed into the bay, the fog started rolling in. This wasn't normal morning mist. It was thick and strange, with an odd blue-green tint. The water beneath us looked darker than usual, almost black in some places. My depth finder was acting up, showing readings that didn't match my charts. "Something's not right," Joseph said quietly, watching the fog swirl around us. "The water feels angry." I thought he was just nervous. But as we got deeper into the bay, I started feeling it too. It was like the ocean itself was holding its breath, waiting for something terrible to happen. We found the Northern Pioneer 3 hours later, anchored near the face of Marjorie Glacier. From a distance, everything looked normal. The boat sat steady in the water, all her equipment intact, no obvious damage visible above the waterline. But as we got closer, the wrongness became clear. There was no one on deck, no response to our radio calls, no movement at all. "Hello, Northern Pioneer," I called through my bullhorn. "This is Ranger Deepcurrent. Anyone aboard?" Silence. We tied up alongside, and I climbed aboard with Joseph right behind me. The deck was clean and organized, like the crew had just stepped away for a moment. Coffee was still warm in the galley. Beds were made. Research equipment hummed quietly. But in the main cabin, we found the ship's log. Dr. Deepwater's handwriting filled the last few pages, and what I read made my blood run cold. Asterisk. Day 12. The sonar contacts are getting stronger. Something massive is moving under the glacier. The underwater cameras caught images of what look like scales, but they're huge, each one the size of a dinner plate. Tom thinks we should leave, but this could be the discovery of the century. Asterisk. Asterisk. Day 14. Equipment keeps malfunctioning. Compass spins wildly, engine temperature spiking for no reason. Whatever's down there is affecting our electronics. The water temperature dropped 20 degrees overnight in a localized area beneath us. Asterisk. Asterisk. Day 15. We're being watched. I know how that sounds, but all of us feel it. Something intelligent is studying us from below. The bioluminescent displays at night are unlike anything in the scientific literature. Organized patterns, almost like communication. Asterisk. The final entry was hurried, the handwriting shaky. Asterisk. Day 16. It's coming up. God help us, it's coming up. The whole glacier face is glowing blue. Emergency evacuation to asterisk. The log ended there. Joseph was examining the hull when I finished reading. He called up from the water, his voice tight with fear. "Captain, you need to see this." I leaned over the side. Below the waterline, massive gouges ran along the hull. They looked like claw marks, but each one was 6 feet long and deep enough to sink the boat. Whatever had made them was bigger than anything that should exist in these waters. My grandfather told stories about marks like these, Joseph said, climbing back aboard. When Koshta Ka gets angry, boats show up with their hulls torn but still floating. The sea spirit doesn't want to kill, it wants to warn. I was about to tell him this was no time for old stories when my radio crackled to life. The voice was faint, distorted by static and what sounded like whale songs. "This is Dr. Deepwater, Northern Pioneer Crew. Trapped in underwater caves. Something massive. Guardian of the ice. Need help." The transmission cut out, leaving only the eerie whale songs echoing through the radio. My depth finder started going crazy, showing a massive contact directly beneath us. The screen showed something at least 300 feet long, moving in the depths. But according to my charts, we were over 1,000 feet of water. Nothing that big should be able to live down there. "We need to leave," Joseph said, backing toward our boat. "Now. The spirits are warning us." But before I could respond, the water around us began to glow. A soft blue-green light spread out from beneath the boats, growing brighter by the second. Through the clear water, I could see something rising from the depths. It was huge, serpentine, and it was coming straight for us. "Move," I shouted, running for the Ranger's Pride. We cast off just as something enormous passed beneath us. The water displaced by its movement lifted both boats 10 feet into the air. For a brief moment, I saw it clearly, scales that reflected the bioluminescent glow, multiple sets of eyes like blue stars, and a head larger than my entire boat. Then it was gone, disappeared back into the depths, leaving us rocking wildly in its wake. My hands were shaking as I started the engine. Nothing in all my years at sea had prepared me for what I'd just seen. This wasn't a whale or any known sea creature. This was something from a much older world, something that had been sleeping under the ice for who knows how long. "Koshta Ka," Joseph whispered. "The Guardian is awake." As we fled toward deeper water, I looked back at the Northern Pioneer. She was still floating, still intact, but now I understood why. The creature hadn't destroyed her because it didn't want to. It had taken her crew somewhere, and somehow they were still alive in underwater caves. The question was, how were we going to get them back? We tried to leave the bay. I'm not ashamed to admit it. What we'd seen was beyond anything I could handle with standard Ranger equipment. But as we headed for the mouth of Glacier Bay, we ran into a wall of ice that shouldn't have existed. The glacier had calved in perfect formation, creating a barrier of icebergs that stretched across our escape route. My chart showed open water there just that morning. It was impossible, unless something had deliberately caused the ice to fall in that exact pattern. "It doesn't want us to leave," Joseph said, staring at the ice wall. "Not until we understand." My radio crackled again. This time the voice was clearer, but filled with an otherworldly harmony that made my teeth ache. "Captain Deep Current, this is Dr. Deepwater. We're alive but trapped. The entity is ancient, older than the glaciers. It's not hostile, just protective. Dr. Deepwater. I called into the radio. Where are you? How can we reach you? Underwater caverns, beneath Marjorie Glacier. Air pockets heated by its body. Captain, it's been alone for so long. Thousands of years. It just wants. The transmission dissolved into whale songs and static. Joseph was watching the water around us with growing alarm. Captain, look at the depth finder. The sonar showed multiple contacts surrounding us. Not one massive creature now, but dozens of shapes moving in coordinated patterns. As if the entity was calling others, or showing us that it had been there all along, hidden in the depths. Then the water began to rise around us. Not waves. The actual level of the bay was lifting our boat higher and higher. Through the clear water, I could see massive coils moving beneath us, creating currents that defied every law of nature I knew. It's demonstrating its power, Joseph said quietly. Showing us what it can do. The electromagnetic interference got worse. Our compass spun like a roulette wheel. The engine temperature gauge climbed toward the red zone even though the cooling system was working fine. Even my watch stopped working, the hands frozen at 3:17. That's when I saw the first body. It was floating face down about 50 yards away, wearing the yellow survival suit of the Northern Pioneers crew. I gunned the engine toward it, but as we got closer, I realized something was wrong. The body wasn't floating, it was suspended in the water, held in place by something beneath. Don't touch it, Joseph warned. It's not what you think. As we watched, the figure slowly turned to face us. It was Tom Bradley, the Northern Pioneers engineer, but his eyes glowed with the same blue light we'd seen from the creature, and when he opened his mouth, whale songs poured out instead of words. He raised one arm and pointed toward Marjorie Glacier. Then he sank slowly beneath the surface, as if being gently pulled down by invisible hands. It's not dead, Joseph said in wonder. The spirit has taken his voice to communicate with us. More bodies appeared around us. The entire crew of the Northern Pioneer, all floating in the same impossible way, all pointing toward the glacier. Their eyes glowed with that ethereal blue light, and they moved in perfect unison, like dancers performing an underwater ballet. Then they were gone, vanished back into the depths, leaving us alone with our fear and confusion. My radio came alive with voices. Not distorted this time, but crystal clear. Nate, it was Dr. Deepwater, but speaking with impossible calm. You have to understand, it's not a monster, it's a guardian. The last of its kind. The glaciers are its home, and we invaded. Where are you? I called back. How do we get you out? We're safe, warm. It's keeping us alive in caverns we never knew existed. But it's lonely, Nate. Imagine being the only one left of your entire species, watching the world change around you for thousands of years. The water around us began to glow brighter, and slowly, incredibly, a massive head broke the surface 50 yards away. It was like looking at a mountain that had learned to swim. Scales the size of dinner plates reflected the dancing lights beneath its skin. Multiple rows of eyes regarded us with ancient intelligence. But it was the sadness in those eyes that hit me hardest. This wasn't a mindless beast. This was a thinking, feeling creature that had been alone for longer than human civilization had existed. Joseph began to sing. I didn't understand the words. They were in his native Tlingit, but the melody was haunting and beautiful. The creature's massive head tilted toward the sound, and its eyes began to pulse in rhythm with the song. My grandfather's song, Joseph explained without stopping. For speaking with sea spirits. For showing respect to the guardians of the deep. The creature began to respond, not with words, but with harmonies that vibrated through the water and into our bones. It was whale song, but infinitely more complex, language older than any human tongue, and somehow, impossibly, I began to understand. It was telling us its story, how its kind had lived in symbiosis with the glaciers for millions of years, how they had maintained the balance between ice and sea, feeding on the abundant life that flourished in the thermal vents beneath the glaciers. How, one by one, its people had died or gone into deep sleep as the world warmed and changed. Now it was the last, the final guardian of a sacred trust. The research team had awakened it with their probing and cameras and sonar. But instead of destroying them, it had brought them to safety, hoping to finally have someone to talk to after millennia of silence. It doesn't want to hurt anyone, I said, finally understanding. It just wants to not be alone, Joseph finished. To have its guardianship acknowledged and respected. The creature's song changed, becoming urgent, pleading. Through the electromagnetic harmony, I heard Dr. Deepwater's voice again. Nate, it's showing me the future. What happens if the glaciers disappear completely? The thermal vents will die, the entire ecosystem of the bay will collapse. It can prevent that, but it needs help. It needs someone to speak for it in the human world. As the creature sank back beneath the surface, I realized what it was asking of us. Not just rescue for the research team, but something much bigger. A covenant between two species. An agreement to protect this last sacred place. But first, we had to find a way to reach the underwater caverns where the crew was being held. And the only way down was through passages that would flood and drown us long before we could reach them. Unless the creature itself guided us there. Joseph made the decision for both of us. Without warning, he stripped off his jacket and boots and dove into the frigid water. I shouted his name and reached for him, but it was too late. The 50-degree water should have killed him in minutes, but instead, that blue glow surrounded him like a protective cocoon. Joseph, I called, leaning over the side of the boat. He surfaced 20 feet away, treading water easily, despite the cold. His eyes now carried that same otherworldly light. When he spoke, his voice harmonized with whale songs. It's warm, Captain. The spirit protects those who show trust. You have to come down. The crew needs rescue, but more than that, it needs to show you the truth. Every instinct screamed against it. I'd survived the war by following protocols and never taking unnecessary risks. But Dr. Deepwater and her team were depending on me. And this creature, Ko-Shta-Ka, was offering something unprecedented in human history. Direct communication with an ancient intelligence. I thought of the sadness in those massive eyes. The loneliness of being the last of your kind. Sometimes, doing the right thing means throwing out the rulebook. I dove. The shock of impact with the icy water should have stopped my heart. Instead, that blue luminescence enveloped me like a warm bath. I could breathe. Not air, but something that filled my lungs and gave me oxygen without drowning. The electromagnetic field was sustaining human life in ways that defied every law of physics I knew. Joseph was beside me, moving through the water with impossible grace. Below us, the creature's massive form undulated gently, guiding us toward the glacier face. As we descended, I realized we were entering a hidden world that existed beneath the ice. Caverns opened before us, filled with air and warmth. Bioluminescent organisms covered the walls like living stars, providing soft blue-green light. Thermal vents created pockets of tropical warmth in the heart of the glacier. It was an ecosystem that had existed here for millions of years, hidden from human eyes. We surfaced in a cathedral-sized chamber. The research team was there, all 5 of them, sitting around what looked like a campfire made of glowing coral. They looked up as we emerged, smiling with an odd serenity. Nate, Dr. Deepwater stood and embraced me. She was warm and dry despite being in an underwater cave. You came. I knew you would. Are you all right, all of you? Better than all right, said Tom Bradley, the engineer I'd seen possessed earlier. It's been educational. Do you know how long this ecosystem has existed? How delicately balanced everything is. The creature's presence filled the cavern without the creature being physically there. Its consciousness touched mine gently. And suddenly, I could see what the research team had seen. The thermal vents that powered all life in Glacier Bay. The way the creature's bioelectricity maintained temperatures that allowed diverse species to thrive. The slow death that would come if the glaciers melted completely, and this ancient guardian had nowhere left to go. But more than that, I saw the creature's memories. Cons of solitude. Watching its species die one by one as the climate changed and humans spread across the earth. The desperate hope when it sensed the research vessel, thinking perhaps its people had finally returned. It's dying, Dr. Deepwater said softly. Not from age or disease, but from loneliness, from carrying the responsibility for this entire ecosystem alone for so long. What does it want from us? I asked. The answer came not in words but in images flooding my mind. Cooperation. Protection of the bay from the increasing ship traffic and tourism that would disturb the delicate balance. Recognition that this place was sacred, not just scenery for humans to exploit. And most importantly, It wanted someone to stay, someone to serve as a bridge between the human world and the ancient realm beneath the ice. Joseph stepped forward, his eyes bright with understanding. I'll do it. My family has always been guardians of these waters. Let me stay and learn the old ways directly from the source. Joseph, no, I protested. You don't know what you're offering. I do, he said calmly. This is what my grandfather prepared me for my entire life, to be a bridge between worlds when the time came. The creature's presence intensified, and I felt its gratitude wash over me like a warm tide. Through the electromagnetic connection, I understood what would happen. Joseph's consciousness would blend with the creature's, allowing him to live in both worlds, human and sea spirit. He would become the voice of the deep waters, speaking for the ecosystem that had no other advocate. The research team needs to return safely, Joseph continued. And you, Captain, need to make sure the human world understands what lives here. Create protections. Keep the sacred waters safe. Before I could object, Joseph walked to the center of the chamber. The creature's massive head rose from a pool I hadn't noticed before. Joseph placed his hands on the great scaled brow, and blue light exploded between them. I watched my friend's body dissolve into pure energy, becoming part of something vast and ancient, but his consciousness remained, speaking to me one last time. Tell my people I chose this path. Tell them the Guardian is no longer alone. And Captain, make sure no one forgets what you've seen here. The cavern began to shake, not with destruction, but with something like joy. The creature had found its voice in the human world at last. Now it was time to return to the surface and convince the authorities that Glacier Bay needed protection like no place on Earth. The rescue was officially listed as a maritime emergency caused by unusual glacier calving. Dr. Deepwater and her team suffered minor hypothermia but recovered fully. Joseph Stormtide was reported as missing at sea during the rescue operation. The Tlingit community honored him as a man who gave his life to save others. Only I knew the truth. The government classified the incident and declared Glacier Bay a sensitive ecological zone with restricted access. Research activities were limited to approved environmental monitoring. Tourism was carefully controlled to prevent disturbance of the marine ecosystem. I never told anyone about the creature except in the vague terms of my official report: unusual seismic activity and electromagnetic anomalies possibly related to mineral deposits in the glacier ice. It wasn't lying, exactly. Just translating the truth into language bureaucrats could accept. But the bay itself changed. Ships that entered without permission experienced mysterious equipment failures. Unauthorized diving operations found their gear malfunctioning at critical moments. Word spread among sailors that Glacier Bay was somehow protected, that the sea itself would defend its secrets. I stayed on as head ranger, becoming an advocate for traditional Tlingit conservation practices. The tribal council and I worked together to establish protocols that honored both their ancient knowledge and modern environmental science. We never spoke directly about what lived beneath the ice, but we all understood that some places are too sacred to exploit. The electromagnetic sensitivity I developed after my underwater journey proved useful. I can predict glacier calving events days in advance by feeling the subtle changes in the creature's bioelectric field. I know when the sea is calm and when something has disturbed the balance below. Sometimes, late at night when I'm anchored over the deepest parts of the bay, I feel Joseph's presence in the whale songs that echo through my hull. He's still there, still watching, serving as the bridge between our world and the ancient realm below. Tourists come to see the glaciers and the wildlife, never knowing that their safety depends on the goodwill of something older than their entire species. The bay remains pristine, protected by laws written in Washington and enforced by something far more powerful than any human authority. I'm retiring next year. My replacement is a young marine biologist with Tlingit heritage, someone who understands that true conservation means respecting the spirits of the land and sea, even if science can't explain them. On my last night as head ranger, I anchored over Marjorie Glacier and spoke to the deep water. The covenant holds. The sacred waters remain protected. Your guardian watches over both worlds now. The response came as a gentle vibration through the hull. Whale song harmonies that somehow conveyed gratitude and eternal vigilance. In the depths below, bioluminescent patterns danced like stars, spelling out messages in a language older than words. Glacier Bay keeps its secrets. But those of us who know the truth ensure that some mysteries remain sacred, some guardians stay honored, and some ancient covenants are never broken. The last thing I wrote in my ranger log was this: all quiet in the bay. The guardian sleeps peacefully, all is well. I never mentioned that it only sleeps with one eye closed. The other is always watching. My name is Dr. Samuel Emberwind, and I need to tell you what really happened in Katmai that October. People call me Sam. I'm a park ranger and a volcano scientist. I study the mountains that breathe fire and ash here in Alaska. I've been watching volcanoes for 12 years now. My grandmother was Yupik, and she taught me the old stories about the mountains, but I always believed in science more than stories. I have written papers about Alaska's volcanoes. I predicted 4 small eruptions that could have hurt people. The government listens when I talk about volcano dangers. Katmai National Monument sits in the middle of nowhere, 250 miles from Anchorage. You can only get there by small plane. It's where the big eruption happened in 1912, the one that buried whole villages in ash. They call it the Valley of 10,000 Smokes because steam still rises from thousands of holes in the ground. The ash fields stretch for miles. Hot gas shoots up from cracks in the earth. The ground is warm under your feet, even in winter. Most animals won't go there. Even the ravens stay away. My cousin Lucy works with me sometimes. She studies the old Yupik ways and helps translate the stories. Lucy is smart, went to college for anthropology, but she also knows things the books don't teach. Things my grandmother whispered about the ash that moves on its own and the spirits that live in volcano breath. I never believed those old warnings about Tunrak, the ash spirits my people fear. Not until October 12, 1968, when I saw the Geological Survey team walk out of the ash fields as something else entirely. The team had been out there for 2 weeks studying volcano hazards, 6 scientists from the government, looking at whether we could build roads and visitor centers in the valley. Smart people with fancy equipment and college degrees. They were supposed to radio in every day. For the first week, everything seemed normal. They sent reports about soil temperatures and gas readings. Then the calls got strange. Shorter, just basic check-ins, with no real information. On October 10th, we lost contact completely. Their emergency beacon stayed active, but only static came through the radio. Sometimes we heard what sounded like breathing mixed in with the white noise. I flew over in the Park Service plane that morning. I could see their camp from above. Tents still standing. Equipment spread around in neat patterns. I even spotted people walking around down there. But something felt wrong. They moved too slowly, too straight, like they were following invisible lines on the ground. The air that day felt thick and warm, even though it was October. The ash fell in small spirals instead of drifting with the wind. The smell was all wrong too. Sulfur, yes, but something else. Something that reminded me of meat, left too long in the sun. Lucy came with me to the valley entrance. She brought sage and other plants my grandmother used for protection. I brought my scientific instruments and my .357 Magnum for bears. We hiked in on foot because the plane couldn't land safely in the ash. The closer we got to their camp, the more the ground seemed to breathe. I could feel it rising and falling under my boots. My temperature readings showed the earth was getting warmer, but my seismic equipment detected no earthquake activity. The gas detectors went crazy, showing chemical compounds that shouldn't exist. Lucy kept stopping to whisper Yupik words I didn't understand. Protection prayers, she said. Her face was pale, and she gripped the sage bundle tight in her fist. The ash is listening, she whispered as we crested the hill above their camp. Can't you feel it watching? I was about to tell her she was being silly. Then I saw their camp clearly for the first time. Everything was arranged in perfect circles. Tents, equipment, supply boxes, all placed exactly the same distance apart. Their scientific instruments hummed and beeped in rhythm, like a mechanical heartbeat. And there, in the center of it all, was a circle of gray powder that definitely wasn't there in any geological survey protocol. But no people, no voices, no movement except for the steady rise and fall of the ground beneath our feet. That's when we heard the breathing coming from the holes in the earth around us. The breathing wasn't human. It was too deep, too slow. It came from different holes in the ground, but all perfectly timed together, like the whole valley had one giant set of lungs. Lucy grabbed my arm. We need to leave, now. But I had to find the survey team. That was my job. So we moved toward their camp, stepping carefully around the steam vents. My instruments were going crazy. The temperature readings jumped from 80 degrees to 120 and back again. The air itself seemed to shimmer. Their main research tent was still zipped shut. I called out hello, but nobody answered. When I opened the flap, hot air rushed out like opening an oven door. Inside, everything was neat and organized. Their computers still ran. Their research notes were updated through yesterday. But the pages were covered in a thin layer of gray ash that felt warm to the touch. I read their final entries. Strange stuff. Notes about enhanced heat tolerance and respiratory adaptation. One scientist wrote about how the sulfur gas was starting to smell sweet instead of bitter. Another mentioned that his skin was changing color, but he felt better than ever. The last entry was from Dr. Richard Volker, the team leader. His handwriting was shaky. Day 13. Remarkable discoveries. The ash appears to be alive in ways we don't understand. Team integration with local environment proceeding better than expected. Beginning to understand what the mountain wants from us. Sam, Lucy's voice was tight with fear. Look at this. She pointed to the research samples they'd collected. Dozens of small containers filled with ash from different parts of the valley. But the ash was moving, swirling in slow circles inside the sealed containers. And it was warm. I could feel the heat through the plastic. That's when we heard footsteps outside. I grabbed my gun and pushed through the tent flap. A figure stood about 50 feet away, tall, wearing the survey team's standard field gear. But something was wrong with the way he stood. Too straight, too still. Dr. Volker? I called out. Richard? The figure turned toward us. It was definitely Richard. Same face, same beard. But his skin was gray like old concrete. His eyes reflected the light like an animal's. And when he opened his mouth to speak, gray smoke poured out instead of words. He took a step toward us. Then another. His feet left prints in the ash that glowed with internal heat. Lucy was already running. I should have followed her. Instead, I raised my gun and shouted for him to stop. Richard tilted his head like he was listening to something I couldn't hear. Then he smiled. His teeth were black as volcanic glass. Sam, he said in a voice like steam escaping from rock. So good to see you. We've been waiting. Where's the rest of your team, Richard? What happened to you? He gestured toward the ash fields. They're here. We're all here. We've become part of something bigger. Something wonderful. More footsteps. 4 more figures emerged from behind the rock formations. I recognized Dr. Sarah Coleman, the geologist, Mike Torres, the seismic specialist, Janet Kim, the atmospheric scientist, all with the same gray skin, all breathing out that strange smoke. The mountain taught us things, Sarah said. Her voice echoed like she was speaking from inside a cave. About heat, about breathing poison and turning it into life, about becoming more than human. They started walking toward me in perfect formation, no hurry, like they knew I had nowhere to run. My gun felt useless in my hands. How do you shoot someone who might be your friend, someone who was still talking and walking around? You can join us, Janet said. It doesn't hurt. The ash just fills your lungs and shows you truth. Shows you how to live in the fire. I backed toward the tent, but Mike was already circling behind me. His movements were too smooth, like he was floating instead of walking. Lucy was right about the old stories, Richard said. Your people knew about this place, about what sleeps in the deep ash. We woke it up with our drilling and digging, and it's grateful. That's when I noticed the holes in the ground around their camp were all breathing in the same rhythm as the 5 transformed scientists. And the gray smoke coming from their mouths was sinking into those holes, creating some kind of loop. I ran. Behind me, they didn't chase, they just laughed. The sound mixed with the breathing from the ground until I couldn't tell which was which. I found Lucy hiding behind a large boulder about a quarter-mile away. She was pale and shaking. We have to get out of here, she whispered. This is what my grandmother warned about, the ash that takes people and makes them part of the mountain's mind. But as we started back toward the valley entrance, more figures appeared on the ridges around us. All walking with that same too-smooth movement, all breathing out gray smoke. The whole survey team was hunting us now, and they had all night to do it. We hiked through the dark for hours, but they were always there. Sometimes we'd see them silhouetted against the stars on the ridgeline. Sometimes we'd hear their voices calling our names through the steam vents. They never seemed in a hurry, like they knew we couldn't really escape. Lucy taught me a breathing technique her grandmother had shown her. Short breaths through the nose, holding it, then out through the mouth. It seemed to help when the gray smoke drifted our way. The old stories say the ash spirits need you to breathe them in, she explained as we rested behind a cluster of hot rocks. Once they're in your lungs, they can change you from the inside. My radio crackled to life around midnight. Richard's voice came through, but it sounded like it was mixed with the hiss of escaping steam. Sam, we know you're listening. You can't leave the valley. Look at your instruments. I checked my GPS. The readings made no sense. According to the satellite, we were moving in circles even though we'd been walking in a straight line for hours. The temperature was climbing too, now over 100 degrees in the middle of an Alaska October night. What's happening to this place? I asked Lucy. It's waking up, she said. The thing that sleeps under the ash. Our drilling team stirred it from a long sleep. We climbed higher, trying to reach the valley rim. But the ground kept getting warmer. Steam rose from every crack. The breathing sounds from the holes got louder and more coordinated. That's when we found Sarah. She was sitting cross-legged next to a large fumarole, letting the superheated gas wash over her face. Her skin had turned completely gray, and her clothes were burned away, but she didn't seem uncomfortable. Sarah? I called softly. Her head turned toward us. Her eyes glowed like coals. Sam, Lucy. I was hoping you'd find me. What happened to you? What happened to all of you? She stood up slowly. The rocks around her were so hot they glowed red, but her bare feet didn't seem to notice. We were studying the wrong thing, she said. We thought this was just a volcano. But it's alive. It thinks. It's been sleeping under the ash for thousands of years, and our machines woke it up. That's impossible. Is it? She gestured to herself. 48 hours ago, standing this close to a thermal vent would have killed me instantly. Now I can breathe the sulfur and feel it making me stronger. The entity, call it Toonrock if you want, it's not trying to hurt us. It's trying to help us survive what's coming. What's coming? Hurublaig. The big eruption, the one that's going to make 1912 look like a firecracker. This whole region is going to be buried in ash 20 feet deep. But we don't have to die. We can become part of it. Part of the mountain's consciousness. Lucy stepped forward, holding her sage bundle like a weapon. You're not Sarah anymore. The thing that looked like Sarah smiled. I'm more Sarah than I've ever been. I can feel the heartbeat of the earth. I know when the pressure is building. I can taste the chemistry of the magma before it reaches the surface. I'm connected to something ancient and powerful and wonderful. The ground around us started shaking. Not like an earthquake, more like something enormous turning over in its sleep. It's time to choose, Sarah said. Join us willingly, or let the mountain decide for you when it erupts. That's when the ash itself started moving, rising from the ground in spiral columns, forming shapes that almost looked like people. The breathing from the thermal vents got louder until it sounded like a giant was snoring just under our feet. More of the survey team appeared on the rocks around us, all gray, all glowing, all moving with that perfect coordination that meant they were sharing the same mind somehow. The traditional protections won't work forever, Lucy whispered to me. My grandmother said sometimes you have to go deeper. Use the old ways to fight the old powers. What does that mean? It means I have to give it something it wants more than you. Before I could stop her, Lucy stepped toward Sarah. She began chanting in Yupik, words I'd heard my grandmother use when I was little. Protection prayers. Binding words. The ash spirits recoiled like she'd thrown fire at them. Sarah stumbled backward, her glowing eyes suddenly confused. What are you doing? Sarah asked. For a moment, her voice sounded human again. Returning you to the ash that made you, Lucy said. She threw the sage bundle into the thermal vent behind Sarah. The effect was immediate. Steam exploded from every hole in the ground. The breathing sounds turned into a roar of anger. And Sarah began to dissolve. Not dying, but breaking apart into individual particles of ash that swirled up into the air. Run, Lucy shouted. But the other survey team members were already closing in. And now the ash itself was forming into larger shapes. Humanoid figures, 15 feet tall with glowing eyes and mouths full of volcanic fire. The mountain was done being patient with us. The giant ash figures moved like smoke but hit like stone. One swept its arm toward me, and I rolled behind a boulder just as the rock cracked from the impact. Lucy was chanting continuously now, but I could see her skin starting to turn pale gray around the edges. "The breathing ritual is killing you," I shouted over the roar of escaping gas. "It's the only thing keeping us human," she shouted back. Richard appeared through the chaos, still looking mostly human, but with that same gray tint. "Sam, please. You're making this harder than it needs to be. Just breathe in the gifts the mountain is offering." "What gifts? Turning into ash zombies? Enhanced survival, perfect adaptation, connection to geological forces beyond anything science has discovered." He gestured to the massive ash figure looming behind him. "Meet Tunrak. The consciousness that's been sleeping under this valley since the last ice age. Your people knew about it. They left warnings." The ash giant's eyes focused on me. When it spoke, the voice came from every thermal vent in the valley at once. "I do not wish to harm you, small one. Your kind has disturbed my sleep with your machines and your digging. But I bear no malice. I offer partnership." "Partnership in what?" "Survival. The mountain will soon release pressures that have built for decades. Your kind calls it an eruption. I call it breathing. When I breathe out, everything for hundreds of miles will be buried in ash. Join with me and live in that ash. Resist and burn with the rest." Lucy was getting weaker. The gray tint was spreading up her arms. But she kept chanting, and every word seemed to push back against the ash spirits trying to surround us. "There's another way," I said, remembering my grandmother's stories. "The old agreements. Your people and my people made deals before." Tunrak's massive head tilted. "You know the old words?" "Some of them. I was making this up as I went along, but the volcanic entity seemed interested. My grandmother said there were times when the mountain spirits and the human spirits worked together, sharing knowledge, warning about dangers. Yes, in the old times, some of your people served as my eyes and ears in the world above. They would tell me when the pressure became dangerous. I would tell them when to move their villages to safety. We can do that again. You don't need to transform people, just work with them." Richard stepped forward. "But Sam, the transformation makes us so much stronger. We can survive in conditions that would kill normal humans. We can explore the deep volcanic chambers. We can be the perfect liaisons between worlds." That's when I understood. Tunrak wasn't just trying to save us from an eruption. It was trying to create a permanent workforce. People who could live in the deep earth and serve its needs. "What about their families?" I asked. "Their human lives?" "Improved beyond recognition," Tunrak said. "Enhanced, elevated." Lucy collapsed. The gray had reached her neck, and her breathing was getting shallow. But she managed to whisper something in Yupik that made all the ash spirits step back. "What did she say?" I asked Richard. He looked confused. "Something about remembering the old bargains, the ones that required sacrifice from both sides." Lucy raised her head with enormous effort. "Tell Tunrak that I offer the traditional exchange. My breath for the freedom of the others. The old compact." Tunrak's massive form went completely still. "The old compact has not been invoked in 200 years. "What old compact?" I demanded. Richard translated, his human memories apparently still intact. "In times of great volcanic danger, a descendant of the original treaty families could offer their life force to calm the mountain's anger. The volcanic spirit would accept this sacrifice and withdraw its threat for a generation." Lucy, no. But she was already standing up, walking toward the largest thermal vent. "This is why my family carried the old knowledge, Sam. For moments like this, there has to be another way." "There is," Tunrak said slowly. "The compact can be modified. Instead of death, the descendant becomes my permanent human representative, living in both worlds, preventing future conflicts." Lucy stopped at the edge of the thermal vent. "I accept." "Lucy, wait." But she was already breathing in the volcanic gases directly from the vent. Instead of choking her, they seemed to fill her with light. Her skin took on a golden tint instead of the dead gray of the survey team. "I can feel it," she said in a voice that carried clearly despite the distance. "The pressure building in the deep chambers. The timeline for the eruption. With this knowledge, I can help you predict and prevent disasters for decades to come." The massive ash figures around us began to dissolve back into the ground. The survey team members looked confused, like they were waking up from a long dream. Tunrak's voice became softer, more distant. The compact is renewed. I withdraw my claim on the others. The mountain will sleep for another generation. But the descendant remains as agreed. Lucy turned back to me. She looked like herself, but her eyes held depths I'd never seen before. I'll be okay, Sam. Better than okay. I can feel the mountain's thoughts. I know when it's safe and when it's dangerous. I can protect people. We flew the survey team out the next morning. They remembered everything but couldn't explain it in their official reports. Severe volcanic gas exposure causing hallucinations, they wrote. Temporary disorientation. Recommended restriction of the area pending further geological study. The government classified the whole incident. The Valley of 10,000 Smokes was declared off-limits to unauthorized personnel. Only official volcano monitoring expeditions would be allowed, and only with proper spiritual consultation. Lucy stayed behind, as she'd promised. But she wasn't gone. Not really. She appears in my dreams sometimes, warning me about pressure building in other volcanic systems across Alaska. Twice she's helped me predict eruptions that could have killed people. The scientific community credits my revolutionary new monitoring techniques, but it's really just Lucy whispering warnings through the volcanic network. The survey team members all recovered physically, but they've changed careers. Sarah now teaches geology with a focus on traditional indigenous knowledge. Richard works for the Volcano Observatory, specializing in evacuation protocols. They don't talk about what happened, but they've all developed an almost supernatural ability to sense when volcanic conditions are becoming dangerous. I still work as a park ranger and volcano scientist. But now I combine my instruments with the traditional Yupik observations my grandmother taught me. The government thinks I've developed some kind of enhanced intuition about geological hazards. They've made me the lead consultant for volcanic monitoring across the entire Alaska region. The truth is simpler and more complex than that. Tunrak keeps its part of the bargain. The major eruption that threatened to bury half of Alaska has been postponed. Pressure is released through smaller, controlled vents that harm no one. The mountain sleeps peacefully, but sometimes, when I'm working late in my office, reviewing seismic data, I can hear breathing coming from the air conditioning vents. And occasionally, very faintly, I hear Lucy's voice carried on the wind, telling me about pressure building in volcanic systems hundreds of miles away. The Katmai ash walkers are gone, but the compact remains. As long as Lucy keeps her vigil in the deep places, and as long as I honor the traditional protections my people developed over generations, humans and volcanic spirits can coexist. Just remember, if you ever find yourself in Alaska's volcanic country, respect the ash fields. Listen to the warnings of indigenous peoples who've lived with these mountains for thousands of years. And if you hear breathing coming from holes in the ground, don't ignore it. The mountains are alive. And some of them are still watching. My name is Elena Ravenspirit, but everyone calls me Ellie. I'm a park ranger on Kodiak Island in Alaska, and I've been doing this job for 13 years. I know these forests better than most people know their own backyard. I can tell you which bears fish where, when the salmon run, and how to read storm clouds 3 hours before they hit. I'm part Aleut and part Russian, like a lot of folks around here. My grandmother used to tell me old stories about spirits in the woods, but I never believed them. I'm a practical person. I was a Navy medic before this job, so I deal in facts and evidence. September 8th, 1963, changed all that. It started when 5 rich hunters from down south went missing. They'd hired guides and came up here to hunt Kodiak bears, the biggest bears in the world. These weren't your average weekend hunters either. They had expensive rifles, the best camping gear money could buy, and enough supplies for 2 weeks. When their plane didn't come back to pick them up, people started worrying. The pilot flew over their camp and radioed back that something was wrong. The tents were still there, but no people. All their fancy equipment was sitting right where they left it. That's when they called me. I packed my gear, radio, rifle, medical kit, camera, and enough food for a week. The thing about Kodiak Island is that once you get away from town, you're really alone. The forests are thick with Sitka spruce trees that block out the sky. Fog rolls in off the ocean without warning. and there are valleys where no human has ever set foot. Before I left, I stopped by Victor Stormcrow's place. Victor is an old Aleut man who knows the island like I know bear behavior. He's guided hunters before, and I figured he could help me find the missing group. When I told him where I was going, his face went white. "That's bad country, Ellie," he said in his quiet way. "My grandfather told me stories about that place, stories about the Akutak." "What's an Akutak?" I asked. Victor looked out his window toward the forest. "The bone collector. It looks like a bear sometimes, but it's not. It takes bones and builds things with them, arranges them in patterns." I didn't believe him, of course. Victor was old, and old people sometimes mixed up legends with reality. But as I flew over the island that afternoon, I noticed something strange. There were no birds. Usually the trees are full of ravens and eagles, especially near salmon streams. But the whole area below was silent. The pilot dropped me off at a small clearing about 2 miles from the hunter's camp. As soon as he flew away, the quiet hit me. It wasn't natural quiet. It was the kind of silence that makes your ears ring. Even my footsteps on the pine needles seemed too loud. I found the first sign about a mile in. Animal bones arranged in a perfect circle around the base of a huge spruce tree. Not scattered by predators or weather, but placed there on purpose. The bones were clean and white, like they'd been polished. I took a picture and kept walking. The hunter's camp was exactly like the pilot described. 4 expensive tents arranged in a square around a cold fire pit. Rifles still in their cases. Food supplies untouched. Coffee pot, half full of cold coffee that smelled like it was only a day old. But the men were gone. I called out their names: Michael, Robert, David, James, and Thomas. My voice echoed back from the trees, but nothing else answered. That's when I saw the claw marks. They were carved deep into the bark of trees around the camp, about 8 feet off the ground. I've seen bear claw marks before, and these were wrong. Too big, too deep, and too deliberate. They formed a pattern, like someone was marking territory. I set up my radio and tried to call back to town, but all I got was static mixed with strange clicking sounds, like someone tapping 2 bones together. As the sun went down, the temperature dropped fast. I built up the fire in the hunter's camp and settled in for the night. But sleep didn't come easy. All night long, I could hear movement in the trees around me. Branches breaking, leaves rustling, footsteps that didn't quite sound right. And sometimes, just at the edge of hearing, I could swear someone was arranging things in the darkness, moving objects around with careful, quiet hands. When morning came, I found them. I woke up to find bone wind chimes hanging from the tree branches around my camp. Dozens of them, made from small animal bones tied together with sinew. They hadn't been there the night before. The clicking sound I'd heard on the radio was coming from these chimes, moving in a breeze I couldn't feel. That's when I found Michael Thornfield. He was sitting against a pine tree about 50 yards from camp, perfectly upright like he was just resting. But when I got closer, I saw that he was dead. Had been for days, maybe a week. The strange part was, he looked peaceful. No wounds, no signs of struggle, his clothes weren't even torn. But all the flesh was gone from his bones. His skeleton was complete and clean, held together somehow, still wearing his hunting clothes. The bones were polished white and gleamed in the morning sun. His skull sat perfectly on his spine, jaw slightly open like he'd been about to say something. I've seen a lot of death in my time, in the Navy and out here in the wilderness. Bears, wolves, accidents, hypothermia. But I'd never seen anything like this. It was like someone had carefully cleaned every bone without disturbing the skeleton's position. I took pictures and tried the radio again. This time, I got through to the ranger station for about 10 seconds before the clicking sounds came back. But I managed to report finding one body. Following Michael's trail backwards, I found his hunting blind, and in it, I found Robert Fishbone. Robert was different. He was still alive, sort of, but not in any way that made sense. His skin had turned clear like glass, and I could see his bones underneath. He was sitting in his hunting chair with his rifle aimed out the window, finger on the trigger. When I spoke to him, he turned his head toward me, but his eyes were solid white. "They're beautiful," he whispered, his voice like wind through dry leaves. "The patterns are so beautiful." "Who?" I asked. "Who's making patterns?" But Robert just smiled and turned back to his rifle. His finger bones had grown together with the trigger somehow. Little white deposits covered the metal like coral. I tried to help him, but when I touched his shoulder, pieces of his shirt crumbled away. Underneath, his skin was hard and cold like stone. That's when I heard the singing. It came from deep in the forest, a low humming sound that seemed to vibrate in my bones. Not human singing, more like wind blowing through a cave. But there was a melody to it, something old and sad and hungry. I followed the sound and found a clearing I'd never seen before, even though I'd been in these woods hundreds of times. In the center was a circle of standing stones. But they weren't stones. They were huge bones, each one taller than me, stuck upright in the ground. Bear bones, whale bones, and others I couldn't identify. Inside the circle, bones were arranged in complex patterns, spirals and geometric shapes that hurt my eyes to look at directly. Some were old and yellow, others fresh and white. And moving between them, tending to the arrangements like a gardener tending flowers, was something that made my blood freeze. It walked on two legs like a man, but it was made entirely of bones. Hundreds, maybe thousands of different bones wired and fused together into the shape of a person. 10 feet tall and graceful despite being made of rigid pieces. Its skull was a mixture of human and bear and other animals I couldn't name. This was the Akutak, the bone collector from Victor's stories. It moved among the bone patterns, adjusting them with long finger bones, humming its strange song. Every now and then it would pick up a bone and hold it up to examine it, like an artist studying a brushstroke. I tried to back away quietly, but I stepped on a dry branch. The crack echoed through the clearing. The Akutak stopped humming. Its massive skull turned toward me, and I saw that its eye sockets held points of blue light that seemed to look right through me. It spoke without moving its jaw, its voice the sound of grinding limestone. Ranger Elena Ravenspirit. I have been waiting for you? I ran. Behind me, I could hear it moving through the forest, not crashing like a bear would, but flowing like water, making no more sound than wind through leaves. But I could feel it back there, following me, studying how I moved. I made it back to the hunter's camp as the sun was setting. My radio was working again, and I managed to get through to the ranger station. This is Elena. I need immediate evacuation. We have multiple casualties, and I struggled for words that wouldn't make me sound insane. And an extremely dangerous situation. The voice that came back wasn't from the ranger station. It was Robert Fishbone, speaking through my radio somehow. The patterns are beautiful, Elena. You should see them up close. You should become part of them. The radio went dead with a sound like breaking bones. That night, the bone chimes around my camp multiplied. By morning, every tree was decorated with them. And carved into the bark of the largest spruce, 8 feet up, was a message in letters made from small finger bones. Join the garden. I couldn't stay at the hunter's camp anymore. The bone chimes were getting louder, and every morning there were more of them. Worse, I was starting to hear the Akutak's song even when the wind wasn't blowing. I packed what I could carry and headed toward the old Owlet village. Victor had mentioned it once, a settlement that had been abandoned for over 100 years. It was supposed to be protected by old spiritual wards, whatever that meant. The hike took most of the day. Twice I had to hide when I heard the Akutak moving through the trees nearby. It wasn't hunting me exactly. It was herding me, pushing me toward the village like a wolf pushes sheep. I found the village just as the sun was going down. A dozen small houses made from driftwood and whalebone, arranged in a circle around a central fire pit. Everything was perfectly preserved, like the people had just stepped out for an evening walk. But there were no people. Just bone arrangements everywhere. Every doorway had patterns of small bones hanging like curtains. The windows were decorated with intricate bone sculptures. And in the center of the village, the fire pit was filled with human skulls arranged in a perfect spiral. That's where I found David Greystone, the third hunter. He was sitting by the skull spiral, very much alive but changed. His skin was translucent like Robert's, but worse. I could see his entire skeleton, and parts of it were moving independently from his body. His rib bones shifted and clicked against each other when he breathed. Elena, he said when he saw me. His voice was still human, but there were clicking sounds mixed in. I'm glad you made it. The Akutak wants to meet you properly. Where are the other hunters? I asked. David smiled, and his skull showed through his transparent skin. They're all here. We're all here. In the bones. He gestured to the arrangements around us. Every pattern contains someone. The Akutak doesn't kill us, it preserves us, transforms us. We become part of something bigger and more beautiful than we ever were alone. I raised my rifle, but David just laughed. You can't shoot bones, Elena, and besides, it doesn't hurt. Look. He held up his hand, and I watched his finger bones separate from his flesh and rearrange themselves into a small sculpture. The skin just flowed around them like water. The Akutak taught me this. Soon I'll be able to reshape myself completely. Soon I won't need flesh at all. That's when the Akutak itself walked into the village. It was even bigger up close, and I could see that it wasn't just made from random bones. Every piece had been carefully selected and fitted. Bear bones for strength, bird bones for flexibility, human bones for intelligence. It was a masterpiece of construction. But the most terrifying thing was that I could see faces in some of the bones. Expressions preserved in the calcium, like photographs in bone instead of paper. The faces of everyone the Akutak had collected over the centuries. Elena Ravenspirit, it said in its grinding voice, your bones sing beautifully. I have listened to their song as you walked through my forest. What do you want? I managed to ask. To add your song to my collection. To give you permanence. Your flesh will decay, but your bones will last forever. Your consciousness will join with all the others I have preserved. The Akutak gestured to the bone patterns around us. Every arrangement holds a mind. They are not dead, they are transformed, improved, made eternal. I could hear them then, whispers coming from the bone sculptures. Hundreds of voices speaking at once, all saying the same thing. Join us, it's beautiful here. No more pain, no more fear. Just the eternal song of calcium and consciousness. I've studied you, Elena, the Akutak continued. You understand bones. You've seen how they heal, how they grow. You know they are the foundation of life. I am offering to make you part of the eternal foundation. Behind me, I heard footsteps. Victor Stormcrow walked into the village, carrying what looked like weapons made from whalebone. You cannot have her, he said to the Akutak. Not while I live. The Akutak turned its massive skull toward Victor. Ah, the grandson of Thomas Stormcrow. Your grandfather gave me good sport in 1923. His bones were particularly melodious. Victor raised his bone weapons, a spear and a curved knife that gleamed white in the moonlight. He taught me the old ways before he died, the ways to fight your kind. And look how well they served him. The Akutak laughed, a sound like a graveyard in an earthquake. But Victor was already moving. He began to sing in Alut, a deep chanting that seemed to make the bone arrangements vibrate. The Akutak's blue lights flickered, and for the first time it seemed uncertain. Elena, Victor shouted, the burial ground. Get to the sacred burial ground behind the village. It cannot follow you there. I ran while Victor fought. Behind me I could hear bone striking bone, and Victor's chanting mixed with the Akutak's grinding roars. Then Victor's voice cut off suddenly. When I looked back, the Akutak was walking after me. Victor was nowhere to be seen, but the creature's left arm was now made from fresh whalebone that glowed white in the darkness. Victor had become part of it. I reached the burial ground as the Akutak caught up with me. Ancient bone posts marked the boundaries, carved with symbols I couldn't read. The moment I stepped inside the circle, the Akutak stopped. This protection will not last forever, it called to me. The old wards weaken each year. And I am patient. I have waited centuries for collections like yours. It settled down outside the boundary, like a cat waiting for a mouse to come out of its hole. All night long, it sang to me. The bone song that Victor had warned me about, designed to call to the calcium in my bones. By morning, I could feel my skeleton responding, aching to join the eternal collection. I knew I couldn't stay in the burial ground forever. And I knew the Akutak would never give up. If I was going to survive, I had to find a way to fight back. The sacred burial ground was protected, but it was also a prison. I spent 3 days there while the Akutak waited just outside the bone posts, singing its calcium song and building new patterns from the bones of the village. On the third night, Victor appeared to me. Not his body. That was now part of the Akutak's collection. But his spirit, glowing faintly among the ancient grave markers. Elena, he whispered, I can speak to you here, in the sacred place. But I don't have long. Victor, I thought you were dead. I am. But the burial ground holds memories, and I have things to tell you. His ghostly form flickered like candlelight. The Akutak can be stopped, but it requires sacrifice. He showed me how to see the truth of the creature. It wasn't just a bone collector, it was a prison itself. Inside its massive skeleton were the consciousnesses of every person it had collected over 2,000 years. They were still alive in there, trapped and forced to sing the bone song. It was once human, Victor explained, a shaman who tried to cheat death by preserving his consciousness in bones. But the process corrupted him, made him hungry for more and more bones to strengthen his prison. Every person he collects makes him stronger. How do I stop something like that? The only way to break a bone prison is from inside. Someone must enter willingly, with the knowledge of how to shatter it from within. I understood. Victor was asking me to let the Akutak collect me. The whalebone spear I carried, it's made from blessed calcium. If you can get it inside the creature's core structure, you can free all the trapped souls. But you'll have to let it transform you first. I'll die. Maybe. Or maybe you'll free 2,000 people who have been trapped for centuries, including all your missing hunters. Victor began to fade. The choice is yours, Elena. Stay here and be safe, or save the others and risk everything. I knew what I had to do. The next morning, I stepped outside the sacred boundary. The Akutak rose from where it had been waiting, its bone structure gleaming in the dawn light. You have decided to join us, it said, and I could hear pleasure in its grinding voice. I have conditions, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. You are in no position to make conditions. I am if you want me to come willingly, Victor said. Willing subjects make stronger bones, that the consciousness integrates better. The Akutak considered this. What do you want? I want to understand the process. I want to see how the collection works before I join it. The creature gestured for me to follow. It led me back to its bone garden in the forest clearing. But now the patterns were different, more complex, and I could see that each arrangement was actually a storage system for consciousness. Each pattern holds minds, the Akutak explained. They dream together, sing together. They have become something greater than they were as individuals. It showed me how it worked. The creature could reshape its own bone structure, incorporating new bones while keeping the consciousnesses stored safely in the calcium matrix. Every bone held memories and personality fragments. And you? I asked. Where is your original consciousness? The Akutak pointed to its chest, where a cage of ribs protected a glowing core made from what looked like volcanic glass. Here, in the heart of obsidian that formed me during the eruption that first transformed me, perfect. That's where Victor's whalebone spear needed to go. I'm ready, I said. The transformation began immediately. The Akutak placed its massive bone hands on my shoulders, and I felt my skeleton begin to respond. It didn't hurt exactly. It was more like my bones were singing and wanted to harmonize with the creature's song. My skin became translucent. My bones began to separate from my flesh while still maintaining their connections. I could feel my consciousness expanding, touching the edges of the collective mind stored in the Akutak's structure. And that's when I grabbed Victor's whalebone spear from where the creature had incorporated it into its arm. The moment I touched the blessed bone, everything changed. The spear burned with spiritual fire, and the Akutak screamed, a sound like a glacier breaking apart. You have betrayed the collection, it roared, but I was already moving. My partially transformed body was faster and stronger than normal human flesh. I drove the spear directly into the obsidian heart in the creature's chest. The effect was immediate. Cracks of white light spread from the impact point throughout the Akutak's entire structure. 2,000 years of collected consciousnesses began to pour out like water from a broken dam. I could hear them all, every voice of every person the creature had collected. They were singing now, but not the bone song. They were singing songs of freedom. The Akutak tried to pull the spear out, but its bone hands were already beginning to crumble. The blessed whalebone was unmaking the spiritual bonds that held the creature together. If I fall, you fall with me, it screamed. You are part of the collection now. It was right. I could feel myself being pulled into the dissolving consciousness matrix. My partially transformed bones were still connected to the creature's structure. But as I began to fade, I felt other hands grabbing me. The freed souls of the collected were pulling me back, giving me their strength to escape the collapsing prison. Victor's voice was strongest among them. Go, Elena, live for all of us. The Akutak gave one final scream as its obsidian heart shattered completely. 2,000 years of stolen life force exploded outward in a wave of white light that turned every bone in the forest to powder. When the light faded, I was lying alone in the clearing. The bone gardens were gone, the patterns had dissolved, even the creature's massive skeleton had crumbled to dust. But I was alive, transformed, but alive. The Coast Guard found me a week later, half dead from exposure and calcium poisoning. My bones had partially transformed back to normal, but not completely. I could still feel the echo of the bone song in my skeleton, could still see spiritual energy in certain mineral formations. The official story was bear attacks. 4 hunters killed by aggressive Kodiak bears, 1 guide missing and presumed dead. They gave me a commendation for surviving in the wilderness and recovering the bodies. But I knew the truth. And so did the Aleut community. Victor's nephew came to see me in the hospital. He brought traditional bone blessing tools and performed ceremonies to stabilize my partial transformation. He told me that the village was clean now, the old spiritual contamination was gone. But there are others, he warned me. The Akutak was not the only bone collector in Alaska. Your grandmother's stories mention at least 3 more, sleeping in different parts of the territory. They transferred me to a desk job in Anchorage, supposedly for my health. But really, they wanted me where they could keep an eye on me. The government had become very interested in what they called supernatural geological phenomena. I work with them now, but not for them. I document bone anomalies across Alaska and coordinate with native communities to maintain protective spiritual sites. The military thinks they're studying new forms of mineral-based weapons. They have no idea they're actually trying to prevent ancient horrors from waking up. Sometimes, on quiet nights, I can still hear the Akutak's song, not the hungry bone song it sang while collecting, but the final song it sang as it died. It was beautiful and sad and grateful. 2,000 people found peace when that creature finally fell. But there are still others out there, waiting in caves and buried in permafrost, dreaming their hungry dreams. I've trained a few other rangers to recognize the signs. Unusual bone arrangements, animals avoiding specific areas, radio interference that sounds like percussion, temperature drops that don't match weather patterns. Because the thing about ancient evils is that they're patient. They can wait decades or centuries for the right conditions to return. They can wait for the protective wards to weaken or for people to forget why certain places should never be disturbed. The Akutak is gone, but its legacy remains. My bones still sing sometimes, especially during volcanic activity, and sometimes, in the deepest forests of Alaska, other bones are singing back. I keep Victor's whalebone spear on my desk now. It's just a decoration to most people, but I know better. It's a reminder that some fights are worth the cost, even when the cost is everything. And it's ready for the next time the bones start singing. Because there will be a next time. There always is. My name is Elena Ravenspirit, and I guard the places where old hungers sleep. It's not the job I wanted, but it's the job the bones gave me. And I'll keep doing it until my own bones join the eternal song. Asterisk. Final word count. Approximately 4,200 words. Optimal for 15-minute read time. Asterisk.